The Thinking Tackle podcast.
To that point, and then as soon as that was announced, and then I think it was on the Monday, it was announced, wasn't it, on the Wednesday that people were allowed to go fishing, which I thought was quite irresponsible from a fishery point of view, because I run fisheries and I had to close swims to get them ready, and it was literally had 3 days to react to it. And not only was we busy for the fishing lakes, but also the orders online just went quadrupled overnight, and it just become a real. It was like, wow, this is it's great to have the orders there, but trying to service all the customers.
Yeah, how quickly can you get the orders out?
Usually we're on like a sometimes next day, depending on the product, but usually it's 2 to 3 days, depending on what they've ordered. But we're very, very quick usually. But this just sort of, when you get an influx of hundreds of orders, you're on the back foot.
That is mental,
you're
isn't
on
it?
the back foot straight away.
And like you say, I mean, it wasn't until sort of mid-May when the lakes were open, was it? It was around that sort of time, wasn't it?
I'm trying to think of the actual date now. I can't remember when it was, but yeah, it was.
Did you see the pictures outside Farlow's?
Yeah.
That's
incredible.
Just mental.
Yeah. It was weird, isn't it? Because it was only sort of a short period where people weren't allowed to do something, but as soon as they were allowed, it come back with a vengeance. And I think because a lot of people were furloughed, they had a lot of disposable money. All they wanted to do was get out on the bank and do some fishing. And it was like a perfect storm for us, which was great. But it's a great problem, but a problem all the same.
Yeah.
Well, a lad I met in your car park a few weeks back, and he's like, "I'm furloughed. I'm fishing 3 or 4 nights a week with my son. It's best. I normally only go once or twice a year."
Yeah. So. That's it, and they all need bait and tackle, don't they? So
more hooks, more boilies.
I mean, this company, for it's we don't hardly sell any products over like 50 quid. I mean, it's like everything is pretty much disposable, and it's the first place people are going to go. Tackle and bait, isn't it? And,
it is. Yeah.
Do you think some of the shops have struggled?
Absolutely. I think it's highlighted to some of the shops the need for the mail order side of their business. Just relying on footfall alone is dangerous. As we sort of move forward, I think the competition online is growing every year, regardless. And it just highlighted that when the lockdown came in place and people weren't allowed to go to the shops, then the only ones surviving were the ones with strong mail order sides of their business. So I think a lot of shops will learn a lesson from this, and they either will unfortunately perish. And if they're well placed in the country, you've got that footfall, that return straight away. But unfortunately, a lot of businesses will go by the wayside. Yeah, it's sign of the times, unfortunately.
Yeah,
sad.
The ones that are probably already in a vulnerable position in the first place, or it's easy to celebrate how well the industry's done, and companies like yours have done. But
there's casualties.
You're mindful that there are casualties as well.
Absolutely, yeah. I noticed Veals of Tackle. I used to go in there as a young boy, and it's been around for years and years, and that unfortunately folded, closed its doors for the last time, and lockdown was probably the final nail.
Was it?
Yeah. Big established shop, centre of Bristol. It's a shame.
Did you hear about that? I mean, the Big One show as well. I mean, that must have cost some traders a lot of money as well to cancel that.
Yeah,
that was quite close to the event.
It was right. Yeah. It was literally a couple of days before, wasn't it?
Wow, yeah.
A little bit more, because we were going to go.
What was it?
We planned to do that, and but I think at that point, we kind of imagined it was going to be cancelled, because you were thinking, well, this is beginning to spiral a bit here.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I want to go and stand in a hall and shake hands with people.
Yeah, I think people had already got that in their heads, and it was starting to escalate a little bit.
Yeah, it was going up exponentially, wasn't it? And I think, I think it was on the cards, but to
cancel events so close to it, though, there's a lot of things that have been already done, isn't it? And money spent.
There's a lot of investment there already, isn't there?
Huge amount. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure whether it's going to whether they're going to redo the show this year or not.
I think there's talk of October.
That's what we heard. Yeah.
But whether that actually happens, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's still, we're still in a situation now where you couldn't really be in a crowded hall. I'm not sure.
We're still a long way off that, aren't we?
I think so. It would seem foolish when you hear some of the other events that happened and have happened that have now had. There's been a spike off the back of it. I think. It's crazy to go.
Well, you look what's going on in the States and stuff at the moment. I mean, it's like
the States is immense.
It's just nuts.
Yeah, incredible. Yeah, we'll all go rioting on the streets every night for weeks and weeks, and now we have, 2 weeks later, it's just carnage, isn't it?
Because there's no leadership, is there?
No.
And
he doesn't believe, does he?
And you've got to hope that you've got a responsible governor of a state, haven't you?
Yeah.
Hopefully that they're democratic. If they're democratic, you might be all right. Otherwise, it's
it's chaos.
It's chaos. Okay, guys, we are live. Mark, Bryant, Simon Scott again.
Hello.
Welcome to the podcast. How are you both?
Good.
First time on, Mark?
First time here, yep. Yep, long drive, but no, it's great to be here.
No,
Great and come and see Korda Towers. I haven't been here at all, so lovely to see it. Impressive.
Yeah, it's not a bad place.
It's a huge place. Yeah, it's great.
Actually, it's the best day to come, isn't it, Tobe, at the moment? Because I think we're working on Mondays and Tuesdays at the moment, and there tends to be more people here. But
So everybody's in on Monday, so it's good to see everyone, isn't it?
this is the first day for us as well, really, where it's like it feels like normal again a little bit.
Right.
Yeah. So we're here to talk about the Think and Tackle show that I think premiered yesterday. Actually, it's doing quite well, isn't it, by the looks of it?
Well, I watched it.
Yeah, I watched it. That's
That's
two.
two.
That's it. I watched it.
3.
Actually, I watched the
My
unedited
dad
version.
watched it. My dad, my wife.
Oh, it's racking up
We're
now.
nearly a handful.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
good. Yeah.
Tobe, you haven't watched it, have you?
Oh, you caught me out there.
Tobe, you're going to watch it
I'm
tonight.
gonna
It's a
watch
little
it.
treat for you
Poor
tonight.
Toby, he's
Tobe,
got better things to do with his spare time.
Yeah.
I'm going to watch it. Like.
That was my missus' response last night. Yeah.
Does she enjoy it?
She likes it. She's
Yeah.
She watched it last night with me. I sort of watched it half looking at her phone and glancing up every time I sort of made a noise or something. Yeah.
I think she's glancing up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I watched
Yeah,
it
it's
with
a start.
Sue.
It's a start.
I sat beside Sue and I'm watching it obviously intently looking for yet another capture by Mark Bryant. And I looked round and Sue is fast asleep beside me.
Oh,
I
no.
think, it was
The
enthralling.
intention was there,
Yeah.
Simon.
Thanks.
So how many have you done now, the pair of you together? It's been a few years, hasn't it?
Yeah, fair few.
The pair of us together. I've done 2 with Danny and 3 with you.
Yeah, 3 or 4. And I did
Same
a few.
thing.
I did a few before that.
Yeah, you've been a lot.
Yeah, done a
quite
fair.
few.
How did it all work out then? I mean, how did you two get paired together?
I don't know.
I know
Do you know
him.
each other?
I know him.
yeah.
He knows me.
You've known each other a long time.
Yeah.
a fair long time.
Yeah, I'm not sure how we got paired together, if you want to call it that. I don't know.
Doesn't Danny or someone just ring you up and say, right, okay, from now onwards we want you two together then?
Yeah, it's sort of the last couple of years, certainly. Yeah, whether he likes we bounce off each other, I don't know, because we're friends anyway, then I suppose that sort of connection's there already, which helps with filming.
Yeah. I guess it's not always easy building a partnership up with people that you don't necessarily know too well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But Mark does need someone to help him net the fish. So
Simon was very
I think
good
I
at-
play an important role in that.
I was very pleased for you to see you. I mean, you caught some nice fish as well. You caught
Yeah.
a really nice fish. So you guys, you've worked together and stuff in the past.
Yep.
I mean, do you have much of an impact with Mark's company or?
Yeah, certainly over the years, Mark and I have discussed lots and lots of things to do with the bait, and obviously through the fish farm, I've got fish at my disposal I can feed things to. So yeah, it's we've had a pretty good relationship for a long time. I've been a consultant for Mark in inverted commas for a good few years now.
Crikey, a long time.
A long time.
Yeah.
So I remember Mark being in this tiny little garage, rolling boilies by hand on these little tables, and I'd go in there and he said, "You can have as much as you want." And
How much I can roll.
And I'd look at it and
It's
think,
not a lot.
I feel a bit bad if I ask for more than like a kilo. So I'd go,
It's a day's work.
just give me half a kilo, Mark. That'll be fine, and a pot of pop-ups. And then I'd leave and think, it's taken him days to roll that lot. I don't feel so bad now. I might go for 5 kilos now if I'm feeling a bit brave.
Yeah, you were saying earlier, weren't you, that you were making bait, so Mark decides to one step further.
Properly make bait. No, Mark makes a lot of bait and very good bait too.
So do you find that easy, Mark? Useful to be working with Simon a little bit and being able to for your bait stuff?
Oh, hugely. Like Simon's a wealth of knowledge when it comes to carp, in general. Crikey, and I remember the days sending lots and lots of bits and pieces down to him, samples of X, Y, and Z, and he's got the perfect environment where he used to work at Spar Shop. Got lots of tanks available, carp, so it's always great to bounce ideas off him, and I always pick his brains about all sorts of stuff.
So you've been responsible for many of Mark's baits? Or?
I don't know about that. Bits and pieces.
I
think not all many of Mark's baits. We did talk about a new bait on the way up here, though. So there's more stuff in the pipeline.
Yeah.
I'm quite excited about that.
Yeah, me too.
More about that in the future.
Yeah, we want to hear about that. Yeah. So Mark, I mean, you've come on the show with Simon. I mean, how have you been over lockdown and stuff like that? Business and.
It's been incredibly busy for us, and I was talking before, weren't we, about there's obviously casualties for this epidemic, and unfortunately tackle shops will be part of those casualties. But for us as a mail order company who supply direct to customer, it's been probably the perfect storm for us. Lots of shops unfortunately had to close and they didn't have the mail order facility. And then with people being furloughed, we had a lot of anglers who were still getting paid. disposable income because they weren't spending money on going out and socialising, obviously. So they've all been fishing. And they've been fishing, they need bait, they need tackle. So the online has just gone through the roof. Everyone I've talked to with an online business in the fishing industry it's just gone crazy, absolutely crazy. And it's to the point where a lot of companies are putting up a 2-week, 3-week, 4-week lead time on products. It's just been absolutely mental. So I've been working 12-hour days now for most of the month, and working the weekends as well. And it's been tough, but it's a great problem to have. But it's a problem, and it takes its toll.
And you're waiting at apparently a property is just going through for you at the moment as well, isn't it? So it's all going on.
It is all going on. Yeah, I complete on a property tomorrow, and that's gonna give us the welcome space that we need to move the business and to live personally. And there's lots of other opportunities with some lakes there as well. So yeah, it's been a lot going on over the last few weeks, not only with being incredibly busy at work, but we're trying to get this property over the line in very difficult times, and particularly with the banks, which are moving at a snail's pace. So it's had a lot of challenges.
So is that going to mean kind of, is the company going to have to stop making bait for a period of time, or are you just going to transition that gradually?
We're going to transition gradually. We're going to stay where we're located at the moment. We work out of two units at the moment. And the plan is to keep those. We rent them at the moment, and we're going to keep them over the next probably 12 months anyway. I think it'd be foolish to jump straight into the new property and trying to make it work from day one. We're going to do a nice gradual move, and I can go incrementally over the next few months. And there's a lot of it's an old dairy farm, so there's a lot of buildings there that are in various states. Some of them in various states of decay. So I need to get in there, get electric there, 3-phase electric, lots of planning. So there's a whole. I'm sort of in a lovely period at the moment, because exciting as I am to complete, I know that as of tomorrow when I get the keys, I've got a whole lot of work ahead of me, a lifetime of work probably. And
you said you weren't necessarily looking for a property. Did it seemed to sort of spring up on you a little bit, didn't it?
It did. You know what? It's I've been looking for an opportunity to own my own buildings for a number of years. I've been looking for an opportunity to own my own lakes for a number of years, and I thought my utopia when I started Baitworks 15 years ago was to buy an old farm and to live there and have a factory on the side of on the same property, and also have lakes there to manage as well. And it's a bit of a pipe dream back then, but it's always something to work towards. So I've been very close on some lakes on the Cotswold Water Park to purchase over the last sort of few years, now that Baitworks is in a position financially to do that. And also with units that come up for sale, they're very few and far between, because I wanted to stay very local and central to the Cotswold Water Park, because it's obviously a hotbed and a very good area to run a business from. So when a farm came up, which was literally, as the crow flies, 2 miles from the water park, and it had land, lakes, buildings, so I could move there, and a farmhouse, I just thought, wow, what an opportunity this is. So been moving heaven and earth to make it happen.
Yeah, I mean, where do you start? You got the lakes as well, and the company itself. So it sounds exciting. How big are the lakes?
They're only small. They're only 0.3, 0.4 of an acre. So if I knock them both together, I could make 3/4 an acre. But there's the lucky thing is it's all on a nice clay base, all the land there. So there's an opportunity to extend what I have and make some 1 acre, 2 acre, and maybe even some bigger lakes in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You run a podcast as well, don't you? So we slightly different podcasts, aren't we? But
but all carp fishing, I suppose, in general. But we run a podcast which is popular, and it's great. It's great to see. There's lots of podcasts now for carp fishing, which is fantastic.
There's plenty, aren't there?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, 5 years ago there was probably one podcast, and now it's. But it's a good media platform, isn't it? We were talking about that before, weren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And we get we don't sell or anything on. We're just trying to provide good content on the podcast that we do, and it's like a more. I know this one's very much the same. You're not trying to sell anything. You're just trying to get good guests in and provide.
Yeah, they were desperate
content
this week.
Yeah, we're scratching. Wow, I know.
Good guests.
I know you have a guest.
Yeah, really.
You have a guest cancelled, so we got roped in. Didn't we? Got called at the last
hour.
Who
can we ring?
Yeah.
How can you say a thing like that?
Mark, I just want to say, for people that don't know, what's the name of your podcast if they want to go and find it?
Yeah, it's called the Carp Fishing Podcast. So nice and
there
simple.
You go, nice and easy.
Yeah, nice and easy.
What's it about?
Well, that was my next question.
What do they come out once a month, Mark?
Yeah, once a month. So usually the first of the month we get them recorded on the day and then put out same day. And we very much is very much on the bank. So me and Mike Holly, who works for me now as well, he's recently been he's in charge of our media. So we'll go out on the bank and we will record a podcast together, but we'll also try and get guests. So he'll be flying around the country recording with all sorts of people. Some people you'd heard of, some people you haven't heard of. Anyone who's got an interesting story or we think's an interesting character, we'll go and record with them. So it's been good fun.
Yeah, it's like this as well. I mean, obviously people expect to hear bigger names possibly, but I mean, if someone's got a good story to tell them, you can learn something from it. It's
yeah,
you know, and it's quite a segmented show as well, isn't it? It's not just one interview, so it's
no, that's right.
You know, it's good. And your social media generally for Baitworks now has really been stepped up.
It has. I think, you know, when you sell mail order, your shop window is your website, and you need to pull as many people back to that website as you can and display your product as best you can. And, you know, social media, I've been a very early adopter of that back 10 years ago when Facebook was, you know, popular, but I saw the traction straight away from if I'd spend, and I dabbled with advertising in the mainstream magazines for carp fishing, you know, the Carp Worlds and Advanced Carp back then, which unfortunately some of those obviously are no longer with us. And I always noticed if I put an advert into, say, Advanced Carp and it cost me £300-400, the traction I'll get back off that, and I'll put a code in there to see if, you know, people rang up and used the code or whatever to get a discount, and we'd get a couple of orders, 3 or 4 orders, and maybe that's in large part back then people hadn't heard of us, which is a fair comment. But if I was putting posts onto Facebook, and back then I was doing little videos and onto YouTube and that, we'd get so much more. It'd come back 10 times over. So it was a very easy business decision back then. You say, well, you put more energy into that, and that was Facebook at the time. So we was very early adopters of the social media platform, so I know how important they are, and you have to have that in place as you move forward as a business to scale. And bringing someone in to look after that, their sole focus, I think is crucially important. Otherwise, I'm trying to wear too many hats, trying to do X, Y, and Z. You just never do it justice.
So what's your day-to-day job at the moment? I mean,
at the moment,
running around everywhere.
Solicitors, lots. It's very varied, which is great. You know, I reached a lovely point last year where I was doing a couple of days media-related stuff, which is, you know, very important. But the other 3 days, I was basically formulating the base mixes, the liquids. So I still retain the intellectual sort of property of the ingredients or the core baits that we do. I'm not ready to pass that on yet because it's one of them. It's hard to let go as a business owner of stuff like, you know, is it intrinsically yours? But I know to move it forward, I have to at some point. So I'm basically formulating the base mixes. So I'm covered in all sorts of marine-derived products, head to toe, every single day.
You're popular when you get home.
Oh, poor Claire. Yeah. No, do you know what the worst thing is? I don't smell it anymore.
That's when it's really bad.
You don't smell it.
Yeah.
You don't smell it. So I will work all day in the factory. I'll be formulating bits and pieces. And even if I take a spare pair of clothes, Claire will ring me up and say, "Oh, can you pick this up on the way home?" And I have to pop into Tesco's. And you go into Tesco's, and you're walking around there, and I don't smell it. And you're picking up bits and pieces, and you go to the checkout, and it's only then when you look round and people are just giving you know, this is back before the lockdown, they're giving me a 2 metre distance anyway. And the worst thing about it is it's one of those smells, a bait factory, is you can't quite place what it is. If it's like dog crap or something like that, you think, oh, he stepped dog crap. But when it's like a musky, fishy, like something's died, it's just, people just look at you in a very peculiar way. And needs to say I don't pick anything up from Tesco's anymore. It's well dodgy.
You must have that problem as well, Simon, don't you?
Stink of the fish.
I mean, it's more natural.
Yeah, a little bit through the winter months, but I try and have a shower before I go to Tesco's.
You haven't got time for that then, Mark?
Well, there's unfortunately no shower facilities at Baitworks at the moment, but no, I've stopped doing the afternoon or the evening run for any bits and pieces there. Yeah. The worst thing was the money as well, because you get to see some cash come over the counter, and I'm handling the cash and counting it and that, and there'd be, if I was been doing pop-ups, I'll have sent from hell on my fingers or something like that, and it would get onto the pound notes, and I wouldn't think nothing of it. I'll put them into my wallet, And I'll go home. Then on a Saturday morning, I'll pop into NatWest to bank them. And I'll get them out and I'm counting them, and this waft of smell would come up, and the bank tellers would be like, "What?
Have you smelt that?
Yeah.
And that's another one of those smells that you just can't put your finger on, but it's absolutely rancid, and
It stays on your skin for days.
It stays. It gets into your nails, and that's the worst bit. You can wash it off your hands. Or it stays on your skin for a little while after, but you can wash that off. But it gets into your nails because your nails are porous. So the smell will get into your fingernails, and unless you cut your fingernails off, then you're not getting rid of it. It's dreadful.
It's leaking out slowly.
It is leaching out.
Yeah, it's doing its job. What is the worst smelling bait then, do you think?
Anything.
I would say mine was monster crab.
Yeah, monster crab.
Monster crab was brutal.
Monster crab, I think the scent from hell's right up there.
Yeah, scent from hell is similar.
There's not much else. I mean, I use it so much, but I absolutely dread opening the pot. Handling the hook baits, and you just think, oh no.
That's caught some fish, that has, hasn't it?
It has. Do you know what? I wish it just flopped. I wish it was one of those, you put it together and you just think, it hasn't worked, brilliant, move it aside. Let's make something smelling lovely. And because I've made a rod for my own back, and I smell of it all the time, and it's on my, every week I'll make a mistake with it and it'll spill and it'll go on my jeans or it'll go on my shoe, and then that's that, they're done. I have to get rid of them. It's a nightmare. Gets on my steering wheel, gets on everything. It's just that musky, horrible stink.
When I was younger, I used to have to make the bait. I had an old Citroen van, and I had to make the bait in there, and it just, you wouldn't be able to resell that van afterwards. No. It was just, that's a brutal smell.
Yeah.
Simon, looking at lakes, some of the lakes were closed, during lockdown, and didn't necessarily see the sort of pressure, the amount of bait that they would normally see. Do you see that kind of coming to any fruition maybe later in the year? I mean, we're going to see differences in fishing this year.
I'm not sure about differences in fishing. I think the fish probably, it was like winding the clock back 20 years. They actually had a closed season. And suddenly fish were visiting areas of the lake that they would have done 20 years ago during the closed season. And for a lot of guys possibly listening to this they won't even remember that, they won't know what we're talking about, but there used to be this enforced 3-month period between the middle of March and the middle of June when no one went fishing. And you'd walk around your local lake and there would be carp in the sunshine, and you could fire out dog biscuits and there were carp just go, it was just fantastic. And I think we had that came back this year to some extent, which I think I quite liked it.
Yeah,
I actually felt quite excited when lockdown was released that I could suddenly go fishing again. Yeah. It felt like it, the absence had really got me keen to go fishing again, I think.
What about those busy day ticket lakes, like Linear, where there's such a big biomass of fish in there that they kind of, you think that they are quite reliant on bait.
I think some of those waters I think were feeding a bit as well, just to maintain the stock. But I think the fish just like the time out, really. I think if you're living in those sorts of venues and there's leads coming in at you 365, then it's probably quite nice to have a couple of weeks off.
Yeah.
So I don't think on the whole, unless it's a really, really heavily stocked fishery, I don't think carp suffered particularly badly.
I guess we're right on spawning as well. So they've spawned now, and it was just before spawning time, really, wasn't it, when we started fishing?
Which is a time personally, I've caught some very big fish carrying a lot, clearly carrying spawn, but I get incredibly twitchy at that time of the year. I regularly get guys saying, should I be fishing when the fish are spawning? And the answer to that is no. It is genuinely a really, really stressful time for the female fish. They're going through a very big process in their bodies. The ovaries are breaking down to release the egg mass, and a big carp might have over 1 million eggs on board. And every one of those eggs is hooked up to a blood supply. The whole of that breaks down over a period as she releases the eggs, and that is, her own body is requiring more oxygen through that process. It's a stressful time, and to get caught then is not a good thing.
Yeah.
So I get guys say, "Oh, I've caught a carp and it's releasing eggs on the mat. What should I do?" And I think probably best to put it back in the pond quick and go home.
Yeah.
But people do, it's still a problem. It's difficult because
a lot of these fish have been used to this most of their lives now as well, haven't they?
Yeah.
Just getting caught at that period. It's surprising when you don't lose more fish, to be honest.
So I think should you fish during spawning time? It's tricky. The lakes are open. I think if you see fish spawning in front of you, then you should probably either go to a different part of the lake all go home. And you shouldn't fish for the fish that are actively spawning. Male fish during spawning will definitely feed. I've watched male fish spawning. You see this at the fish farm. They'll be thrashing through the weeds. In fact, this very year I did an article for Carpology magazine about spawning, and I was trying to get some photos. And while I was trying to, so I found one of the ponds on the farm. The fish were really going for it. There was 300 odd 15-pounders, and they were lovely looking fish, and I thought, right, that's the pond, it's spawning, brilliant. So I got myself in a great spot, and the fish were thrashing through the margins, and I got everything set up on the camera. And when photographing these fish spawning, I was aware that the male fish would keep peeling away from the spawning group, and they'd be frantically feeding on the reed stems. So they were clearly spawning, fertilising the eggs, and then going, I need a snack, and feeding away. And then 10 minutes later, you see the same fish go past spawning again. So the male fish will feed right throughout the spawning process.
That's what I was going to say to you, actually. A common carp, do you tend to find more male common carp than female generally?
No, it's 50-50
It's
split.
completely 50-50.
Genetically, it should be a 50-50 split.
It's funny on our lake because just around spawning time, around the time when they've just spawned, just after spawning, predominantly commons get caught. It's like so many common carp get caught. I just wonder why.
Are they big fish or smaller fish?
They're old fish. Yeah, they tend to be big older fish, and
I think it's a tricky time. I know of other big fish that slip up around spawning time. You know, it's there's a lot going on with the fish's body, and I guess it you know, if the fish's body processes are going on, there's lots happening. Maybe they lose their balance a little bit. As they're getting older, if you said they're very old big fish. You know, they're trying to keep a lot of balls in the air. you know, suddenly they're keeping an eye on that spot where they're feeding possibly becomes less important, and they get caught.
Sorry, the longevity between a male and a female carp, is there much of a difference?
Well, generally speaking, males will outlive females. As I said, the spawning process is very, very stressful for a female fish, and so it makes sense that female fish are going to pass on before males, just because of what's happening to their bodies every year.
Yeah, it just kind of looks like that. It looks like generally just after spawning that it's the male fish that seem to be getting caught more regularly. Yeah. What about your VS fisheries during lockdown? Much change for you?
No. Well, we had the guys were still working at the farm. I didn't go to the farm as much because on the farm site there are one or two elderly people, and we felt that it would be sensible not to be. You know, it seemed like a non-essential trip, but the two guys that were working for us carried on throughout. We're back to normal now. I'm going every week at this time of the year and doing a sort of day, and then weekends. But no, the farm needed feeding, the fish needed feeding, and the weather's been good, and the stock needs managing, and they get fed every day. Water quality testing going on. So the
weather's been amazing, actually, hasn't it? Since that whole period as well.
We've had some fantastic weather. It's been a great summer so far for growing fish. And,
has it?
Yeah, the farm is already creaking at the sound of monster carp, which is good stuff.
Excellent. So we got you two on the show to talk about Thinking Tackle, the show that came out last night. So how was it for you guys? Should we just talk a little bit about what the show was actually, what the narrative was, based around autumn carp fishing, basically?
Yeah, great time of year. You know, as we come into the cooler months, everything's ramping down, and that's a great time to be out on the bank because the fish weights are generally approaching their best. So yeah, to be out at that time of year is special, but you've also got the elements as well. You just never know what you're going to get thrown at you, and I think pretty much every condition.
It looked like it.
It did, from warm nights to freezing ones, and
two of the nights were very, very different.
How cold? One of the nights was
like pretty much ground water. It was freezing cold when you're reaching for your hot water bottle thinking, I'm going to die of hypothermia. They're going to find this corpse tomorrow morning under the brolly. And then the second night was boiling hot.
Second night, we had a Wesley come in, wasn't it? And just span things around, and that's sometimes all it takes for a big fish to slip up.
Yeah. And it was filmed on your lake as well, the lake that you run now as a syndicate water. That's Blue Pool.
Yep.
Yeah. So did they approach you and ask you if it was?
I think I've done some filming on there before with Ciprography, Elliot Gray, and we caught a lot of big fish there, which was great, and that sort of, I suppose, spiked a bit of interest. And Danny was sort of looking for a venue and mentioned about Blue Water and said, "Is there an opportunity we can maybe go? You and Simon can film there." And I said, "Yeah, absolutely," and sort of picked the sort of time of year, and went over and had a go.
How long have you had the lake for now?
This is the 3rd year now. Yeah, 3rd year.
And it's been coming on a little bit, hasn't it? There's a good stock of fish in there.
There's always been a good stock of fish in there, but it's just been the club that had it before me. No disrespect to them, but the banks and all the trees and the lake had just been left for 25 years, 30 years, and just the fish had just grown to their natural weight, but also the fauna around the lake was encroaching, and you had huge reed beds that went out into the lake, which was stopping a lot of light penetration. Certainly there was a shallow area with loads of reeds where the fish historically used to spawn, but because it was so chock-a-block with reeds, that the light wasn't able to warm the water efficiently and properly. So you found that the fish would go a couple of years, some of them, without spawning. It was an unhealthy environment for the fish to be in. And just from changing a few things, taking some reeds out, changing the habitat, and obviously the application of some bait as well is helped no end, and the fish are thriving in there, and they've had like a second wind, which is great. So it's meant that when I took it over, the fish that were low 30s are now upper 30s and ticking into the £40 bracket, which is amazing considering they're 30 years old now, something like that.
Yeah, they're pretty old, aren't they? Mid-90s, aren't they?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
No, Simon, it was your first time fishing that lake, wasn't it?
It was. I've seen it from the gate, but I'd never even walked around it. So yeah, it was my first trip. So I was very excited to go there just to have a walk around and see it. And obviously,
do you guys have a little warm up first, or
we should have?
No, we never had time.
We had time.
No, literally, as I walked through the gate with the cameras rolling, that was the very first time I walked onto the lake.
Yeah.
And did they tell you, do you just film a fishing session and just see how it looks on film, or do you?
No, we wish it was like that.
The expression that we've used, and I've heard it used loads before, but it is like fishing with the handbrake pulled right up hard.
We've heard that one before. Simon,
yeah, you would have done. It is so different to normal fishing, and you can't. For example, for me, I'm a great one for just popping down the bank and putting a handful of bait in under a tree. That is just taboo. You can't do that, because you can't suddenly have a baited spot down the margin that's rocking and you've got one in the landing net without it being the whole process being filmed. And although I'll say, well, let's just film it backwards, that just doesn't ever cut the mustard with the cameraman. So if you want to go and put a handful, let's say 10 chopped boilies under the tree 40 yards down the bank, you have to turn to the cameraman and say, in my case on this last shoot, it was Lewis, I'd like to go and put 10 chopped boilies under the tree 30 yards down the bank. And he'd go, brilliant. Okay, well, I'm just getting this sequence here of this robin landing on your rods. When that's finished, we'll do that. So the robin does his bit. Lewis says, right, I'm ready. So then you chop the boilies up because he wants to film that. Then he wants to film you walking out of the swim along the path from 3 different angles to get all the little cutaways of when you see their footprints, the feet going down, that gets filmed. Then he wants to see you walk into the swim from both behind and in front. So that by that point, there's now a cameraman in the swim that you're looking to bait up under the marginal tree with 10 chopped boilies. So the whole thing is just very, very different.
It doesn't suit your style of fishing at
no,
all,
it's terrible.
Would it suit certain people's fishing more than yours, I suppose?
I don't know.
It clearly suits Mark far better than mine. Anybody that's seen the show will know that.
Yeah, I know. Simon wants to be everywhere around the lake, but during those tackle shoots, you can't do it. You just, like Simon said, everything needs to be filmed in a sequence, and you'll see a fish show in a corner and you think, well, I want to move over there right now, but the move from A to B has to be filmed in a certain way, and that could take you 3-4 hours. So by the time you get in the swim and put a rod out, that fish is probably long gone and probably showing in another part of the lake. So
I think we've done enough of this now that we both know and accept that is the way.
That is the way.
The one thing I'd like to say though, and obviously this may well come up, but what I always find staggering with any of the thinking tackles that I've been involved in the filming is the boys that do the filming, they take a lake which looks lovely and they just make them look absolutely magical. And I sat down last night on the sofa and watched the show, and it's just the most mouth-watering views of a lake. It made me want to go fishing straight away.
It looks great.
Oh, so beautifully filmed. I mean, the guys...
You called it Alice in Wonderland.
It was like Alice. They turned a lake into an Alice in Wonderland set. It's amazing. And I know in the case, as I say, this latest show, I was filming... Lewis Barra filmed me a lot during the session. He just didn't seem to sleep. He was filming all the time, and he'd go, I just need to get a little shot of this mouse coming out here, and I want to get a little shot of that. And I would go, Lewis, I'm sorry, I just need to sleep now. And he'd be awake before me in the morning filming the moon setting or the stars.
They're more motivated than the anglers.
Oh, it's incredible.
They're a great team, aren't they?
The work
Yeah,
they put
yeah.
in is phenomenal,
Absolutely.
but it shows in the finished product.
It does.
Having watched the show last night, it just a beautiful bit of filming.
But the standard has gone up over the last few years. I mean, there's
huge,
there's a number of companies that are doing it now, aren't there?
There
And they do look great nowadays. Mate, you want to get out fishing? That's
Yeah, definitely.
yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I watched it last night. I thought, I've got to go fishing. You just particularly at October. That sort of time of the year.
Yeah.
The mist rolling off the lake, the dampness. Yeah, it's a very carpy time of the year to be out.
Oh, blimey, yeah. Actually, sorry, Mark. Before we go any further, you've got something there for us.
Yes. So
Sorry, we're a little bit delayed.
That's
there.
all right. That's all right. So I was told to bring a present. I wanted to bring a present. Anyway, I know you got some.
We would happily take another gift home, wouldn't we?
Yeah. Okay.
I'm
So
going to start having some on my desk now.
Oh, you're going to have to.
You're going to have a bigger
This
desk.
gift
sooner or later.
smells interesting.
Yeah. What? So I'm
That's
in the
what that
boat.
smell was.
Yeah, well, this is a really early edition as well. So I'm moving house at the moment, so I'm boxing everything up, and I found this the other day, and I thought it's perfect. So this is a boilie machine, believe it or not, and I used this. So I acquired this, and I can't remember how I acquired it. Someone gave it to me, but I can't remember who it was. I might have stolen it. But it's a boilie machine that you basically put a sausage in the top.
Yeah.
And you basically wind it round, and it comes out and drops out here. And I was making bait in my mum and dad's kitchen with this when I reckon it was 1986. I would have been 10, 11. And so this is what I first made my first boilies on.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I was going to clean
made a
it.
few.
I was going to clean it, but actually that is as it would have been all those years ago. And you can see there's a bit of red on there. So I was making I would have got some dye out of my mum's kitchen and started making bait and there'd been a vanilla essence or something there. But it's as it probably was. I haven't touched it for, crikey, this is 30 odd.
That was a very useful bit of kit then, wasn't it? Because,
34
there were
years.
quite manual ways of making bait back then as well, weren't there? I mean, it's very rudimentary.
It's interesting because some of the bigger machines are based on this principle. So even I was 10 years old making a little bait by myself. It actually, it was a good exercise back then, because when I sort of made my first boilie machines myself, and I always thought about this principle. So it served its purpose. It served me well. And I thought it'd be a lovely little gift to give you.
No, thank you very much. Yeah, sorry we missed that at the start there, but that's great.
I'll pop that there.
Yeah, we'll put it in the middle of the table. Thank you very much.
Might want to clean though.
So we were, no, we'll leave it as it is. It's fine. So it was filmed on the Cotswold Water Park. Could we just talk a little bit about the water park actually? Because the waters around there and stuff like that. I mean, what in your mind, Simon? What makes a really, really good fishery or a build up of lakes like the water park?
Well, the Cotswold Water Park, I mean, obviously Mark will probably know more about the fine details of the actual park than I, but you've got about 100 gravel pits there. They're dug out. It's the Upper Thames catchment. There's just a phenomenal seam of gravel there, and that gravel's been extracted for road construction, house construction. So you've got masses and masses of great big holes into the water table. And that for those guys that aren't familiar with the construction of the different sorts of lakes, but where you dig out a gravel pit, you're basically digging down into the gravels. As you take the gravels out, just like digging a hole on the beach, that the water then ingresses into the hole that you've taken the gravel from. So the lakes up in the water park, if you dug down anywhere in the water park into a field and went down far enough, it would fill up the water. So you've got this ultra filtered water that's passing through the gravel. And it's lovely and clear. It's a very good chemical composition. It's got a nice pH, slightly alkaline, plenty of chalk in it, and it fills the lakes up. You then add sunlight and some nutrients, and you get plant growth, and then you've got the invertebrates that come along. So it creates a very nice, very good environment for fish to grow. So yeah, it's certainly a good starting point. If you then add the right fish, add some more food, possibly angler's bait, or the lake becomes more productive, then you can produce a very, very good environment for fish to grow. One of the I guess features that held the water park back a bit to start with was that the water was actually almost too pure. Whereas if you look at some of the gravel pits around Reading, where you've got the Kennet there are a lot more nutrients in the water. And carp like eutrophic. When I say eutrophic, that means nutrient-rich water. Nutrient-rich water grows algae, it grows plants. And of course, if you grow algae and plants, you grow invertebrates that feed on those, which is in turn carp food. So the water park now has, it's become more rich, and there's more bait going in, more anglers, more fish.
Birds, more bird life as well.
Yeah, more bird life. So you're
yeah.
getting this nutrient enrichment going on, and the lakes there are becoming more and more. I mean, I can remember going back to my first visits to the Cotswold Water Park would have been in my early 20s. I remember going up there and being absolutely blown away by the clarity of the water. And as someone who liked catching fish sitting around the edges of lily pads with bits of floating crust, to go to the Cotswold Water Park, and one of the first lakes I fished was quite a small lake, about 2 acres, and it was sparklingly clear, and you could see the fish doing everything. So I was completely fell in love with that straight away. But those fish, there weren't many big fish up there, but that, there was like 1 or 2 40-pounders in the whole of the Cotswold Water Park. Well, that's changed now. There are lakes with 10 40-pounders and more.
Yeah, the last decade or so, hasn't it? It's started to step up a little bit, hasn't it?
Absolutely. It was. It received an influx of fish in the 90s, which was hugely welcome and needed. And those fish have flourished. And we then got into the 2000s, and unfortunately, the otter predation on the water park has reared its head, as it does, in all parts of the country, and that's really, it took a hit on some of the bigger fish, but it sort of settled a little bit. And I can't help but think that the otter predation, it come out of nowhere. It was an explosion almost of otters. I can't help but thinking that there was an introduction, or it would never be obviously proven, but there was all of a sudden it went from 0 otters being spotted around the park to suddenly 4 or 5 being squished on the roads over one
Seeing
winter.
them everywhere, weren't we?
Everywhere, and they were in all the lakes, and it was carnage, and some of the big fish got unfortunately taken out. But we're finding now there's, the next wave of fish are coming through and are still here, and it seems that those numbers of otters they haven't gone away, but it seems a bit more settled as, territory and all that's come into play. So it's a bit more settled on the water park than it was 6-7 years ago.
And fencing some of the lakes has been difficult as well, hasn't it?
Hugely difficult, yeah, because some of the waters are impossible to fence just because of the size of them, and they're owned by different people. So some of the lakes are not outright owned by some of the clubs, so they're coming up against challenges. There are a number of lakes now that have started to fence, but that will in turn deflect the problem somewhere else. So it is an issue, but the likes of the work that Embryo are doing in terms of bringing the costs down of fencing lakes is fantastic. So it becomes achievable now for a lot more clubs, and we're seeing a lot more fences being erected or being talked about, and that can only be a good thing.
Yeah, definitely.
And it makes you wonder with the water park as well, because like I said, these lakes were pretty much, they were stocked by carp anglers, weren't they?
Yeah,
carp anglers using their own initiative.
Absolutely.
Yourself included. If it wasn't for that, I mean, we would have been a long way behind, really, potentially, wouldn't we?
It would have been, yeah. If those fish hadn't gone in the sort of 90s and subsequent stockings of fish, then we'd be in dire straits now, and the clubs wouldn't be able to survive. Syndicates wouldn't be able to operate, so we'd be in a whole world of trouble. So you need that continual progression of fish being dripped into these lakes because of the predation problem now. If you haven't got a fence around it, you've got to actually stock fish all the time. It's just a simple fact of life. Yeah,
that's what you need to do. That's what you'd recommend everywhere then, Simon, really, isn't it?
Stock more carp. It sounds good to me, Mark.
VS carp is well ideal.
I think as a fish farmer, and I'm sure Viv would echo the same, there's nothing I like less than dealing with a customer on the phone and I say, have you got an otter problem? No, I don't think so. We'll see if one turns up. I'd much rather they spent the money on the fence the lake, and then I'm happy to stock it because if we spend years growing the fish to see them, I can think of several examples where we've stocked carp that 20-pound fish into fisheries, and within a week they've been taken, and you think that was a lot of work to grow that fish, and it's something you're very proud of, a lovely scaly mirror carp, and it gets eaten within a week, and that's not no one's really happy. That's not a good outcome. So
no, of course.
So to see the fencing going on is great.
But it's great to see some films on the water park now and start to see that, isn't it? Because it's for the concentration of waters that we've got there. It deserves it, doesn't it?
Oh, it's huge. A whole complex of lakes, like absolutely. It's the biggest expanse of water in Europe, and it's a mecca for water sports, not only, all activities including fishing, and there's more lakes being excavated and dug at the moment, and some of those will go to fishing as well. So it's a great place to be. Great place. That's why I moved up there as soon as I could, because I saw the opportunity, and I'm a Pisces. I love water, and I wanted to be surrounded by water. So if I wasn't going to be living by the sea, it was going to be inbound somewhere, surrounded by lakes, and it ticks the box perfectly.
Yeah, I grew up there. I grew up on the water park, and you're just used to driving down the road and seeing lakes everywhere.
Yeah.
But it's not normal, is it? And we just took it for granted so much.
We get customers that come into our shop, and it's the first time they've travelled through, and they want to pick up some bait, and they come through the water park, and they will just be blown away, going down the Spine Road and just seeing lake. And it blows people's mind when they come here, because they are literally back to back, separated by little causeways, some of them. So it's an amazing place to come.
Do you know, a few years ago, we had to rent a place. I literally live on the water park anyway, but we had some people around, and I needed to rent a place on the water park and live as a holiday maker for like 3 weeks.
Oh yeah,
three nights. And it's like, this is a wonderful place. You just don't appreciate it, do you? Until you're actually living, you're having a bit of a holiday on there. And you realise what's, the amenities and what you can do there. It's a great place. But yeah, so it was great to see, the film, on there. So the film was in autumn. So Simon, like autumn carp behaviour in general, were these carp on the programme behaving as you would expect them to?
Well, as someone who blanked frantically for 3 nights on the programme, I'm not sure I'm in any position to talk about it. But yeah, I think autumn, Mark alluded to it, but autumn is a period when the water temperature is gradually coming down. We had one very cold night in particular. And as the water temperature is coming down, the amount of oxygen that it can hold is going up. The fish are generally reaching their top weights, or they're feeding hard. Certainly the female fish are feeding very hard to regenerate their ovaries for the coming May. And as the water's cooling, they're doing that. So they're really packing on the weight. And we see it at the fish farm, the sort of September, October period, the fish on the farm will put on a lot of weight. And that's basically just ovary build up, and so that they're doing that, and that requires a lot of food. Your ovaries, if you're going to produce 1.5 million eggs for the next year's spawning, you need to eat a lot, because all those eggs have got a bit of yolk in them. That's quite a lot of energy. So they're feeding quite hard. So yeah, it's a great time of the year to be out there, and you've got that switch, which I think you often see is that the fish start to feed more at night time. They become night bites, become the norm. I remember going back a few years, but fishing gravel pits where in the height of summer it might be daytime bites and can be quite quiet at night. And as the water temperatures cool and maybe the oxygen levels going up a bit at night, they suddenly switch to night feeding, and that was borne out by during the film. Like the 3 bites were all I think you had 2 in the night and 1 at very first light.
Yeah, you see that on a lot of lakes. That tipping point in October, usually it just tips over to those night bites.
Yeah, and it's all quite. I'm sure it's absolutely down to oxygen. I've said this in the podcast we did previously with you, Simon. But oxygen is a massive. We don't ever think about oxygen from our day-to-day lives. You wake up and you just go, and it's done. But for a fish, he's thinking about oxygen all the time, because the moment they get it wrong, they're dead. They suffocate. So for a carp, is driving his whole activity through the day. The time he feeds needs to correspond with the oxygen in the water, because if he feeds at the wrong time and oxygen's coming down, he won't digest the food very well. So, for example, with carps, Saprinus carpio, once the oxygen level goes below 5 milligrams a litre, then their ability to digest the food starts to deteriorate. So it's actually going through them they're not utilising the nutrients. So all the energy that you've spent as a fish feeding, if there isn't the oxygen there to help you digest it, is wasted. So their whole lives are really driven by oxygen. And so that switch between daytime feeding, which makes a lot of sense, because when the plants are photosynthesizing under the sunlight, the oxygen will come up very high, and at night in a very weedy water that go down a long way. So you get this huge diurnal rhythm. Now that tends to narrow a bit during the autumn, because the days are not as sunny, the sun's not rising as high, but the water's cooler, so it's actually holding more oxygen. So in the summer, you might get very jaggedy diurnal rhythm. So in the daytime, the oxygen goes up very high, and at night it falls a long way down. And in the autumn, that could be just a lot less pronounced. So it's less stressful for the fish. off the back of that big diurnal rhythm in the summer, the pH shifts very high and very low as well, and that's stressful for the fish. That changes as well in the autumn. So the autumn, October time is a great time for the fish. There's less oxygen spiking, less pH spiking, so the water is more stable. So it's a good time to feed.
So are there specific times at in autumn, after dark potentially, where you would expect bites, or is it just more consistent?
It's
right
dependent
upon
the water, but I certainly, going back to examples, I can think of like 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
In the height of summer, that can be quite obviously there are going to be guys watching this thinking, I catch fish at 2 o'clock in the middle of August. There's always going to be exceptions on every lake. It's different. Even on the farm, you can have 2 ponds sat side by side, exactly the same size, but the oxygen will be doing different things in each of the 2 ponds. So it's very, very fluid. It changes a lot to depend upon algae blooms. But 2 o'clock in the morning is a great time in my experience in October. Those early hours, right in the middle of the night, is a great time for a bite in October.
Is that what time you're getting your bites, Mark? Is it that sort of time?
It was, well into dark, sort of that 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, sort of a couple of hours before light, I'd say. That was, especially the big one on the last night. That was, I think about 3 in the morning.
Was it? Yeah.
2, 3 in the morning.
What about a lake like Blue Pool, which is quite deep but hasn't got a lot of weed? I mean, does the weed and depth make any difference? Yeah,
well, there would be algae in that water, definitely. And that will be photosynthesizing in the day and respiring at night. So there will be, a diurnal rhythm, and the oxygen will be changing in that environment, and that will affect the fish's feeding, definitely.
Yeah, on there particularly, we even find in the summer months that the night time is usually the most prolific time, all times of the year, really. It doesn't really change when you come into the winter, but there is a lot of suspended sediment there. And when I've snorkeled in the lake and when I've sent GoPros down to look at the bottom, then there seems to be a lot of bloodworm activity there, so it makes sense that particularly in the summer months that those bloodworm are coming up to the surface in the darkness, and that's when the carp are sort of feeding. It's it's a interesting venue because it's very similar to Gigantica in terms of the makeup. The bottom, it's very, you can put your hand into some of the sediment and it disappear, where it's all like a milky suspended cloud almost. But you can put a lead through it and you get a drop, but the drop's sort of 6 inches through the milky stuff. It's really, really, really strange place to sort of try and fish and trying to get your head round as well.
We said it had that Gigantica colour appearance to it, that turquoise colour. It used to look like that.
Always had that. Always had that.
And you were saying with sediment as well, this sediment is, you were talking about the colour of the fish colouring up.
It changes. It's bizarre. It's like when there's a big wind on there and you've got a lot of undertow, it's like a washing bowl, so it just, all that sediment, which is like soup on the bottom in places, it just stirs up and it becomes quite cloudy and milky, hence the name. And as a result, the fish go quite light in colour and they become quite pale. But then you get a few days of high pressure, little wind, it settles down, all that sediment settles on the bottom and the water goes relatively clear, and it's been at times gin clear. And the fish then change colour. They go like a dark mahogany colour. So it's quite interesting. It's sort of changing, and that can change in a matter of hours. You get a big southwesterly wind come on, or a lot of rain, and the clarity changes instantly. And it fishes much better when it's clear.
Yeah, does it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I've noticed that when it's gin clear and that, the fish, the visibility is much, much better. But as soon as you get that murkiness, it's particularly in the winter months, it doesn't fish for long periods. He's just trying to link it all up. But it's interesting. We filmed on for Sipography a couple of years before, and the lake was quite cloudy, and then suddenly we had like a real hot spell, and this was in, I think it was September we filmed, and we had 3 days of no wind, just like a mill pond, and everything dropped out the water. There's maybe a slight temperature change, so there's no algae in the water at all. And it went gin clear, and as a result, the fish went mahogany, like a real dark colour.
They were amazing.
Yeah, I know. I was catching them.
It.
It was like, wow, look at that. And it was just down to that simple 3-day window where there was no wind. And then suddenly, after we finished that weekend, the wind picked up, all the fish went back to being like a lighter colour.
That's amazing, Simon, isn't it? That they can just switch colour that quickly. I mean, it's like... You'd think that would take a few decades, wouldn't you? I know someone down the fish farm, you notice the fish change.
On the farm, all our ponds are clay ponds, they're natural ponds, so the fish often at harvest come out quite pale. And we often get people saying, oh, well, your fish are a bit pale. And you put them in crystal clear water, they go as black as your hat. It doesn't take that long. No.
We said in our lake, haven't we, that they've really coloured up. And
they look proper black, dark,
Been there for
mahogany.
forever.
It literally looks like they've been in there for decades.
Yeah,
It's,
we get sent loads of photos by customers saying, "Yeah, look at these beautiful fish. They
Where did this
look,
come
they look
from?"
like they've been here all along." It's like, well, they change colour, don't they?
Yeah. You caught quite a nice fish on this film as well, Mark, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. Do you know what? Those the thinking tackles. There's a huge amount of pressure on everyone.
I can imagine.
You know, and it's sort of unspoken to the anglers. The camera crew are very good. They never pass that pressure onto me and Simon. But
You're blanking.
You don't get Danny on the phone.
Yes.
How many of you
Come
caught?
on,
You do.
got to do an hourly report, but it's there is a pressure. And I know that me and Simon have you feel that as anglers, because at the end of the day, there's a lot of money that gets invested into these shows, the camera crew, there's a guy making food, the chef there, everything that goes into it. So it's a pressure situation. So it's not a given when you go fishing, that, and you can go onto venues, and particularly blue water. It's not a given that you're going to go on there and catch fish. It'd actually been fishing very poorly up until that point with anglers. On a weekend it might do one fish between 6 or 7 anglers, so you sort of know you're going to be up against it. So to have a couple of fish, which was sort of always settles the nerves on those shoots, but let's face it, to get a bit lucky with which fish picks your hook bait up. It could have been another small fish. It could have been any one of fish, but for that particular one, which is one of probably 5 or 6 of the bigger set fish, if you could pick one, it'd be probably 1 or 2. I could think in my mind 1 or 2, and that'd be one of them. So to have that on the final day and the final hours, was very sweet. And so it's very nerve-wracking up to that point. But
nerve-wracking when you see it actually just about over the landing.
That sequence of the reel clicking round.
Oh my God, yeah.
I was watching that last night. Oh my God!
It didn't smoothly go into the net. We'll put the video up. We will put the video up for the viewers to actually see. But I mean, that's pretty terrifying in itself, isn't it?
It was heart in the mouth. And as soon as when you hook one of those big fish in that lake, because of the depth as well, and you've got depth of like 10 foot in the margins under your feet, the game, it's not over. And when you get it into the netting range, that's usually when it really picks up. And yeah, this fish was just tearing about at long range. At one point it took off. It just screamed for ages and ages, and after a couple of days of shooting, you're up by the final night, everyone's exhausted. You've been up early and you're filming all day, so to have and luckily for me, it wasn't. I managed to catch a small fish from the margins the day before, but the zone out in the middle of the lake, which is usually, if you're going to catch one of the bigger fish, it's a known area. It wasn't looking good. And last night the westerly wind came in, and it literally span round from 2 a.m. to about 4, and then changed back to what it was originally with an easterly. And that was all it took, just a quick change in weather. A group of fish come down, fed briefly. Very lucky.
God.
I felt very lucky to get a bite, and very lucky that it was a big fish. But it absolutely tore off, and I was fishing braid as well. I've been fishing braid for the last couple of years.
Yeah.
I really love fishing braid, particularly on that lake where you're feeling for a drop into soft sediment, but you've got to be sure in your mind's eye that you haven't dropped into one of those abysses, like a pocket of silt that's going down sort of a foot or 2 and just buries everything out of sight. So braid is a revelation to fish with that, and to do it safely, obviously with leaders and stuff. But to feel the lead down and to know what you're fishing over, to present a bait. And
to know what's going on as well. You were getting liners and stuff, which you might not have. That morning when he was getting a lot of liners, wasn't it?
I think the braid, it's a fantastic. I fished braid a lot for the last few years, and it does. It's like it's turning carp fishing up to volume 11. Yeah. It's just you're getting so much more feedback from your swim.
Yeah. Oh, you use it as well, Simon?
Yeah, I've used it a lot for the last few years.
Yeah. Simon's used it more than me, and it was probably me watching Simon and talking to Simon about what's going. He talked to me all excitedly. I ring him up and he I'm fishing Burfield or whatever, and I've got this. I've had a couple of bleeps, and just that transmission and knowing what's going on in your swim, and also for the feel down, the touchdown. What I find with mono is as good, as lovely as mono is, and I've used it for years and years. That after you've done that initial cast, and you'll get a lovely thud on the lake bed, on a lovely drop, because there's no stretching. There is stretch in mono, but when you first cast it and the line's dry, there's not as much stretch as when you leave it in the water and you get a bit of elasticity. You can cast out the same area, feel for the same drop, and it doesn't feel the same.
Desensitizes, doesn't it?
It does, and you question yourself. You think, I'd go back and wrap it up again, and you just think, no, I'm on the right spot. But it's just the stretch in the line, and on some of these lakes where you're trying, particularly the Cotswold Water Park, some of the lakes I have been fishing are like one fish an acre. So you're doing an overnighter, you've got one chance to get on the fish and to get a hook bait out and get a drop. On mono, I was finding it's taken me 4 or 5 casts to be absolutely confident what I was fishing over. With braid, it's like your marker rod. Cast out once, you feel for the drop, it transmits, you know exactly what you're fishing on, you leave it, and it just turns your fishing, I think, for the better. Some venues ban braid, and that's, I can see the reasons why, but if you fish it with a leader, so you're protecting the fish, and the lake permits it, it's a great eye opener.
That's interesting, Mark. So the lake is actually quite spotty then, really, isn't it? Potentially.
There's areas of the lake that are firmer than others, and it's all quite soft. If you think of it, the whole lake is covered. Where that lake was actually a natural washing. They washed the gravel from the lake adjacent to it, to the side of it. So all the gravel that was excavated from the lake to the side was washed in that lake. So as a consequence, you've got a lot of sediment that's washed into the lake, and it's actually now masked all of the old gravel features there. So when you cast out anywhere, you just get a drop through the water, and it goes into either soft, very soft, or ridiculously soft, and that's what you're looking for, the soft stuff. There's no really, you won't find no gravel in there. You won't find the only gravel you may find or clay spots are right in the margin on the edge. But you're feeling for a drop that's semi-soft. Similar to Gigantica when you go over there, you're feeling for that sort of drop, because over there it's very similar. There's no gravel patches or anything like that, unless you're, say, fishing very close. When you're out in the pond, you're feeling for those not firm areas. You can't call them firm, but they're just like it's a soft landing, but it's not as soft as the other sort of spots around, or the other areas around it. And those areas are usually being worked by the fish.
That's what I was going to say, actually.
Yeah, like some of the areas where people naturally get into a swim, and everyone will fish at a certain range, be it 20 wraps, 18 wraps, or whatever. So those spots will get worked down just through natural baiting and feeding, so they become the spots in the swim. But the fish will do that naturally anyway across the lake and work down into sort of the firmer areas. And it's just sort of finding them. And it's really hard to do that with mono, much easier to do that with braid.
Simon, I remember you saying in the last podcast that you actually like to find the stickier stuff.
No, I don't mind the silt.
Yeah,
I think as anglers we can get too hung up on the finding the harder bits. But yeah, certainly you see fish feeding in sediment a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's possibly to do with the presentations, isn't it? It's getting the presentations right. I did a little bit of filming with Tom Roster at the farm last winter where we dropped rigs, and I know a few guys said, well, there was no water in the lake, but we were just trying to demonstrate how it would sit. And I think, you can see why on a firmer bit of lake bed, your presentation is just that, it just works better for you. Whereas in sediment, that necessarily, particularly if the bait gets plugged in the mud a bit, it wouldn't, and you could see it'd be hard for the fish to find it. But obviously, naturally, when they're feeding on bloodworm, they're digging up to their gill plates, 6 inches down into the sediment. That's where the food is.
It's good local knowledge, though, Mark, isn't it? To know, to potentially know what you're really looking for and how. Well,
the blue water is a bit of an exception just because of all that washed sediment in there, and I've been in it myself snorkeling, and we had a diver in to remove a snag a couple of springs ago. And it actually coincided with the clarity being okay coming out of the winter. So he took this snag out, but on the way back to the car park, he's gone across the lake. And he's Rob Morris, you may know him actually. Might know Rob Morris. He was putting his hand into the lake bed, and he said in some areas it just disappear. It literally, it looks like solid ground. You put your hand in it, it just disappear. And then you get down so far, and it starts to get a bit firmer. And I'm just, in my mind's eye, I'm thinking these areas out in the lake, you'll be so careful, because when you're putting out a 3 ounce or 4 ounce lead, that's going to disappear into that. And if you're not careful, your bait's going to get sunken in there with it. So I was very conscious of that on the shoot, and we was both fishing sort of a rotary style, helicopter style, and pushing the bead up probably further than you were, just to take into consideration some of those areas, particularly when you're fishing for showing fish, because you drop into one of those pockets and your bait, you put the free bait out, that's been eaten, but your bait is sunken into the sediment, and that's, as Simon rightly says, carp will go down and feed in there, but when you're looking for a quick bite and just a visual thing, and it's 6 inches below, it's not going to happen.
No. Now, rotary rigs, there's just so much argument for using those type of rigs as well.
Correct, I think. Yeah, especially with now you've got the drop-off systems. It's a game changer for me. Dropping that lead with the opportunity to do that, or to keep the lead on, just means that you don't got that big lead bouncing around. and you can present over pretty much anything. And it's really versatile with moving that stop 6 inches, a foot, 2 foot, 3 foot if you need to. It just means you can, and especially with all the clips now that are coming into carp fishing, I use a lot of loops for not only my hooks but also for all my rigs. So you can very quickly turn that setup into anything you want it with a few little hooks, hook links.
I like your little rigs, your little multi rigs that you do with the loop and stuff. With the old
just for ease.
That's a clever idea. That I like that.
Yeah, just for ease. I think in this day and age with the hooks, you want to be able to change quickly, particularly if you've caught something in the middle of the night, and we all fall foul to a bream or a tench or two, and the last thing you want to be thinking about, I've got to tie another rig or get another rig out and clip it and using hairs and all that. So I've gone over to making loops and being able to lasso them like multi-rig. I don't claim to have invented anything. It's just you draw inspiration from what you see out there. Yeah. And even now with the bait screws, I haven't used a hair rig now for crikey years. Those bait screws are just so easy, and as long as you've got the right hook bait and everything, they're so quick and able to get out now. Not that my fishing's about speed, it's just for ease.
Yeah, of course it is.
You
make it as easy as you can for yourself.
As simple as possible and as efficient as you possibly can.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the fish you got, what was that, 43 pound?
43.6, yeah.
Was that a top weight for that one, or?
Yeah, it was actually, Yeah, it's a fish that, it's about a 30-year-old fish. It'd be gradually coming, it was upper 30. I think when I took it over, it's like 37, 38. Then the next year it went to 41. And then when I caught it, it's 43. Hasn't been out this year, but it's they're steadily like got a second wind. It's a cracker.
Yeah, it's exciting.
And it was a PB, wasn't it?
It was a personal. Yeah.
That's the mega. It's just what an achievement on a thinking tackle shoot with the pressure that Mark's mentioned. The pressure screws are on.
Oh yeah.
To go and pull a PB out on the last night of the shoot.
And I say I felt incredibly fortunate, and you got to have a bit of luck along the way. And on that last night, it's fantastic.
What was morale like going into the last night? Then was it?
Well, it was. When you're on I've blanked on a thinking tackle before, and I know Simon was in that position going into the last night, so I know that Simon won't say this, but you feel a bit of the pressure and everything, and I'm willing. Everyone's willing everyone to catch a fish, at the end of the day, and there's no givens in this, and we could easily have not had that. Wesley hadn't come in for a couple of hours, I'm sure I wouldn't have caught a fish, and it'd have ended on a couple of small fish, and someone not catching anything, and it would have been a disappointment. But to have that last one, left it to the wire. But sometimes that makes for a great story.
Why does it always happen at the end as well? I mean, I was saying that to John. I mean, I think maybe during the Monster Carp, we do see some bigger ones caught earlier in the show, but generally the show tends to end with a crescendo at the end, and it's like that's
a bit flat. If you caught 43 in the first hour and then nothing
else, it would be very flat.
By the third night, you'd be going,
shit, yeah.
I think I don't know. You notice it on the French venues as well, where it's Big Fish Thursday, isn't it? Always Big Fish Thursday, and I think everything just settles. It's particularly on the first couple of nights, first 2 or 3 nights, you're getting into a bit of a rhythm with the lake, and I don't know. I don't profess to say I've worked it out by any stream, but it was by that night everything's a little bit more settled than that. I must say, like when Simon moved round to the opposite bank, and their fish started to show into one of his corners, and he had a couple of rods on them. I thought for sure.
I thought I was going to get one.
And there were some massive fish up in that corner, wallowing
in the dark.
Yeah.
You think, yes, come on.
Really heavy wallows.
Mark might have caught 2 by this point. I'm thinking I'm going to land a massive carp here.
Yeah.
I'm going to trump him here.
When it hadn't happened in the morning, I was just looking at the rods thinking, I can't believe it.
There's nothing worse.
They were there.
Yeah, nothing worse looking at. I've been on the receiving end of a blank on finger tackle, and there's nothing worse looking at the rods on the last morning thinking, it's
I think I should have brought one with me.
In
the back of the van. I've got a 15-pounder. No one saw me land it, but here it is. His mouth's perfect.
Simon seems to catch a lot of perfect-looking carp.
Yeah, beautiful 15-pounders.
But it's the reality of fishing, isn't it?
Yeah, of course it is.
It is. Yeah, and you wouldn't have it any other way. But you like a bit of luck along the way, and luckily for myself, it came on the last night.
Yeah, it was nice. Bait and approach and everything, guys. I mean, were you doing pretty much the same thing?
I'd say similar.
I mean, I took advice from Mark. Obviously, he knew the lake, and I didn't, and so I took some pointers from Mark. Obviously, at the start, I was trying to get a bite. There were fish the very first swim we started in. There were fish about, so we just went for singles to try and get a quick bite, and then sort of went into a routine of putting a bit of bait in the evenings.
Yeah.
Are they generally bait fish in there?
They are, yeah, they have been, particularly the first year. A lot of people were fishing lots of boilies and they're getting caught and the weights were responding, but you put in 3 or 4 kilos and you get a couple of bites. That was how it went for the first year. Then it sort of changed over the second year, and because they got a bit of a clump in the first year, and it changed, and the fish weren't getting caught at the usual marks. They definitely knew that there was a lot of pressure on the lake, because up until then, the club before, you'd maybe get 1 or 2 on the weekend, no one in the week, as you know. So it was very, very quiet. So they got a lot of pressure and a lot of bait the first year and got caught. And the second year, it was they knew the script, and you had to change your approach. It was little beds of bait, maybe smaller and in closer. So when we sort of went on there, I was of the mind that obviously boilies always plays a part of my armoury, particularly at that time of year. But I went heavy with the liquids, and I think you can at that time of year you can almost fool the carp into thinking that with the liquids, particularly the soluble liquids, you can load the boilies up. You can load a kilo of bait with so much liquid that when that's on the bottom spread over an area and the food stickers are leaching off them, being dragged up with the oil that's being used in the mix as well, when the carp comes across and from distance, then it can fool them into thinking that those food there's 5 kilos down there, but when they tip up to feed, there's a kilo. So you're tipping the odds in your favour that way, and it's really cost effective, I suppose, from baiting as well.
Can you? I think I've heard you say before that you can't use too much liquid. Is there a limit to what you can?
No, not at all. Not at all. You can't overload it. The trick is trying to prolong the slow release, because everyone can soak their boilies and then put those boilies out. Let's just take a soluble liquid like krill, hydroslate, or any of those sort of liquids. A dip, any of your dips are generally, you put them in the water, they're going to cloud a bit like milk, and they're very soluble. But you want to do is control that solubility. So if you put them onto your boilies and put them out in the lake, yes, you're going to get a lot of attraction initially, but a lot of it's going to dissolve and diffuse and go to zero over a period of time. Now, if you add oil onto the baits as well, you're creating a barrier straight away. So especially if you soak the dip in first, then put the oil on second, you're sealing the boilie in effect. And as the oil leaches out, some of the food signals will leach out as well. So you're slowing that process down. So it's getting your head around trying to slow all those liquids down so they don't just go in. It's great if your bite time is when you get there in the first hour, then it's great because you've got a load of liquids working for you. But if the bite time's 6 or 7 hours later, you've got to suppress those liquids working, and you can do that with oils, and there's other tricks you can do with other ingredients to slow it down, slow breakdown times.
Do you know what the breakdown times roughly are then? With what how much breakdown would you be looking for?
Excuse me. With the boilies, I'm looking for them to work over. Instantly. You want baits working straight away, but you want them progressing. If you're looking at the bite time is going to be into the darkness, and you're putting the bait out, say last light, you've got 6 or 7 hours where you think maybe when that fish is going to turn up. So you can lock that in place with oils. That would be a much slower progression. Let's not forget the bait as it's on the bottom. Half the bait's going to be in sediment, half's going to be exposed. As that bait naturally starts to break down, different boilies break down at different rates, and as those baits are breaking down, then you're getting a slow, continuous release. You can do it with pellets as well. Pellets are really good. You got your humble trout pellet that will start to break down, but still release oils way into sort of 5-6 hours. You notice when you put I used to fish horseshoe a lot. We used to put spod trout pellets out at night. Invariably the bite time would be in the morning anyway, and when the fish would come over a spot, you get a big flat spot in the morning, so there's still things working for you over that time. So there's lots and lots of ingredients you can use to help suppress those liquids, but in a sense you want to, as I said, you want to sort of control that, and boilies are a great one because you can control some of the breakdown faster than others, and there's other components like fast breakdown pellets, so you want to get a lot of different ingredients or different components there breaking down at different times to release those food signals. So you want to progress them and keep them strong.
Did you not have some crumb in there? When I remember you filling the spom up in the film, there was some quite soft.
Yeah, that's a good point actually.
Yeah, so there's quite a lot, when your spawn was hitting the water in the show, you could see a white cloud beneath it.
Yeah, so you've got the whole boilies. I cut boilies in half and I'd crumb some. So you're taking the boilie in 3 different stages. The round boilie is obviously going to break down a lot longer than half boilie, then a crumb. So it's trying to stretch those times out and have a continuous flow of liquids leaving your baited area, and oil is absolutely brilliant for that. If you imagine a soluble dip on the lake bed is going to cloud around your vicinity of your hook bait, which is fantastic, but it's no good if the fish are 14 foot above you. But what the oil will do, it will drag some of those fucus up through the water. And as you get the flat spot on the top, some of those fucus will come back down, and also with oil, it will drift away. So it's one of the very few products that can actually draw fish in from a way away. You can drag fish in because that oil is floating on the surface. It's tiny. It's the droplets of the other food items that are coming out of the oil. It's a bit like I've used the analogy before, a bit like chumming for great whites. They on the boats they will use blood, offal, and oil, but the oil plays a crucial role. If they just used the blood and the offal, they'd tip it over the boat and it would cloud and sink down vertically into the abyss. But by using oil, it suspends some of that food particles within the oil. As it floats off along the sea, tiny droplets are coming out of that, and the great shark then can follow that trail from 5 miles or 10 miles away. And it's the same principle you can use in your carp fishing for those liquids and oils. You're just using similar products, just in a different approach. So it's a really, really important part of fishing, for me anyway.
It's definitely, you're thinking about, it's not just throwing a boilie in, is it? You're working another level of baiting.
You are.
You're not just using a bag of boilies, you're pimping them up.
Yeah, and on matches, I've got a couple of friends I used to supply liquids to, and they'd use some of the oils, and they'd be dragging fish from competitors' pegs over just on that very simple premise and principle. But it's something to think about in your angling. It's not only to get something working on the bottom, it's to pull fish in. You can't do it with a soluble liquid, because by the time it's diffused and trying to find fish 40 yards away, it's down to zero. It's gone. It's gone.
Do you spend a lot of time on that, with liquids and thinking about bait?
Yeah, I mean, I similar to what Mark showed on the show, I'm a great believer in having, and I like lots of bits and pieces down there as well. So not just a bed of whole big boilies. I like chopped boilies. I like boilie crumb. I think that keeps fish feeding. Obviously, the liquids Mark's talked about, having played about and tested those, you can dip a bit of plain, a simple white bread in some liquids and put it in a pond at the farm, and they clearly, they're looking straight up for it. They're on it. They hunt that out quite quick. So it's obviously, adding that to your mix and getting that to the bottom of the lake is a great.
What about in terms of actually mixing different baits together? Where are you guys on that?
For me, definitely. What, different flavoured boilies?
No, boilies, sweet corn, hemp together.
Yeah, I think all sorts, because I like that. I think if you were a carp eating just a bed of 18 mil boilies, okay, there might be an element of moving from bait to bait to bait, which makes you catchable. But the bait, as you suck it up, is behaving in a certain way. So anything that doesn't behave in that way is going to raise suspicion. But if you've got bits of sweet corn, chopped boilies, half boilies, crumb, whole boilies, possibly different size boilies in there as well, then the fish is constantly thinking, which one's the trap. So
do you see selective feeding? I mean, you must see fish feeding all the time.
And they're amazingly efficient feeders, and I think they're able to process the food very quickly in the mouth. But if all the bait that they're hoovering up off the bottom is the same, then you're kind of giving them a bit of a split second quicker to work out what's what. Whereas, if it's a sweet corn hook bait or a dumbbell boilie hook bait or an 18 mil, you've got different options. And I find certainly in my fishing that sometimes, it can be quite a small change makes a big difference. So, using a boilie dumbbell, Mark makes little tiny dumbbell hook baits, using one of those, but having 18 mil hook boilies dotted around on the bottom as well, you can slip them up because they're kind of on the lookout for a big hook bait. So it prays to chop and change, and chop and change on the buoyancy as well. I think Mark alluded to fish. In the first season at Blue Water, the fish were getting clumped on big beds of bait, the same old thing.
Yeah.
The second season, that changed.
Yeah.
The fish are still feeding. They're still out there looking for it and eating, but they had learned, they had been conditioned to watch out for that trap.
Big one, conditioning. It happens all the time,
And in the same way at the farm, if you feed the fish on the farm in one spot, and then you do it for a month, and then you drive the truck in and you drive past that spot and go 100 metres down the bank, they'll all be waiting at 100 metres.
Yeah, I've heard you say that.
But it takes time for them to suss it. Yeah. They'll eventually, within a few hours, they'll work it out. But particularly when they hear the pellet going in. But they learn, and through experience, they learn very quickly. So you know, if every time I pick up an 18mm boilie, I get smacked in the mouth and someone takes a photograph of me, I'm going to be a bit nervous of eating 18mm boilie. So I think mixing it up is a great trick.
I think it comes down to like venue specific as well. It depends what you're trying to achieve. Like the type of fishing you're doing, I suppose. I do a lot of sort of overnighters, and sometimes on some waters where we can do it, a bit of pre-baiting comes into it, and in that instance I find that you can condition the fish just through simple repetition of baiting. You can feed 15s or just 18mm boilies and condition them to come into a spot and feed on them, because they're feeding without lines in the water. So when you come to fish your one night every week or every 2 weeks, you can nick one out the pack and keep that going for quite a long period. Whereas on some venues where if you're fishing there for the weekend and you've got packs of fish coming over you, then absolutely trying to hold those fish in an area with little bits and pieces, absolutely makes total sense. But to come back to your question on selective feeding, I have noticed that on some of the venues that I run. It was clearly evident over in France when I fished over Gigantica for the first time. I was at the time then, this was a good few years ago now, I was feeding boilies, tiger nuts, and I was crushing up zebra mussels from the margins and spotting them out at a range. Managed to catch a few fish, and noticed that some of the fish that I was catching, obviously on the boilies now, they're eventing the boilies, which is great. And then I caught this common right at the death, and I remember I tipped one of my boilies with a tiger nut for the last couple of nights, and I caught this common. It was about £27 or whatever. And I've got it in the net. And what I do on all fish, whenever I catch a carp, I always lightly push down the vent, towards the vent, from the head end towards the vent. And basically, whatever is in the last bit of the transient line comes out of the fish, and you can tell what it's been eating that a few hours before. And it's you learn some really interesting stuff from that. And this fish was venting just tiger nuts and zebra mussels. That was it, no boilies at all. I squeezed and there was quite a lot that come out, and we put it into the retainer. Tom was fishing at the way for me, so he come down. By the time we've got it out to do the photos, we've seen like 10 minutes. Open up the sling, there was literally, I got a picture of it. I should have brought it in. I got a picture at home of this sling just covered in zebra mussels and tiger nut, and that's it, but no boilies at all. And if I had not tipped my boilie with that, I think it was going for the tiger nut, and the boilie was just obviously there on the hair at the time. But yeah, always sort of stuck in my mind that there are these fish that will selectively feed on whatever food items that is. And there's plenty of carp in the lakes that I run that haven't been caught, and I just think they're not boilie feeders.
Do you think there are certain baits that are just better fished individually rather than mixed?
Individually, humble single tiger nut, and Simon's your man on this one. He loves his old tiger nuts. He's got plenty of
sweet corn, Simon, as well.
Sweet corn and tiger. I love Mark's bait, but if I had one bait for the rest of my life, it'd be tiger nuts.
How dare you?
I love sweet corn. It would be sweet corn. I think on a given situation with fish in front of me, they'll go for sweet corn first. But the problem with sweet corn is everything eats it. So the first rudd that comes along goes, I love that, and your sweet corn's gone. So tiger nuts, you've got the longevity, so great bait. But I like to mix up chopped tiger nuts, sweet corn, boilie crumb, put the whole lot together, and you've got options for hook baits. And if I'm fishing 2 or 3 rods in an area, I might fish one with sweet corn, one on a tiger, one on the boilie.
It makes sense.
Yeah. And I can think of, I had a run of fish a while ago, and they all the big mirrors came on the right hand rod, which was a pink pop up. All the others did bites, but they didn't catch a £40 mirror.
Yeah.
So you've got to chop and change to find out the one that's going to catch you the biggest.
Absolutely.
And you're fishing on those. So were you fishing a couple of rods out into the middle and one in the margins, or
a couple of rods out into the middle initially, and then
very very tight.
No, they were on blue water particularly. It's I find it's better to spread your rods. To have, you're trying to turn one bite into 2 all the time on there, and if you fish them tight onto one area, it always just does one bite, and you're trying to turn those takes into numerous takes. And I find the best way on those sort of venues where you've got lots of sort of sediment on the bottom, it's all very flat and clean, is to try and get a bait and approach sort of spread out by at least 20 yards. 10 or 20 yards. You just fish in zones out there. There's no spots as such. There's areas where it's a bit more firmer than others, but you're just fishing into zones, and by that way you can hopefully get a take on each rod. As it happens, I just take on the one. But I heard of fishing sort of the margins and that and through the night. So reposition one in the morning, and that's what sort of just nicked a lucky bite, really.
So that 2K was covering a 20-yard area, then, was it? That you were putting out.
So you with the spom, you're never going to be spreading out that much. So you'd literally have a few spoms over one rod out into a zone, a few spoms out onto another rod in the zone, and you'd pepper just a couple in between the two, not loads and loads of baits. You're baiting effectively a line, and when those fish come in, it's particularly with all the sediment down there, when they stir the bottom up, if you hook one of those fish on those areas, because of the turbulence on the bottom, they don't know that their mate's just been caught 10 yards away, 20 yards. If you're fishing very tight, they know instantly straight away. So I find that way you can hopefully turn one bite into a couple, and that's always the challenge on those sort of venues.
Thinks about his fishing, doesn't he?
He definitely does. Yeah,
Lots of attention.
It's good.
Yeah, it's just try to say, invariably if you're doing one night, you put all that effort into your one night's fishing, wherever that may be, and you've got to work in the morning. You want to try and sort of maximise it, and you can always that one take that always baffles me, because I always ask the question: if you've had one take, if I put more bait in, would I turn that into two, or if you spread them out, can you turn it into a couple of takes? So there's always questions whirling around, I suppose.
Yeah, Mark said that to me in the past. I said, I put 21 baits out and I caught one. He said, but if you put 20 kilos out, you might have caught 10.
As a bait maker, a true bait maker.
Yeah.
Well, I can't take 20 kilos off you because you can't make it.
No, that's very true at the moment. Yeah, there's not available. It's not available.
Yeah. What about boilie fishing going into? Because I mean, I've noticed possibly that the fishing in autumn is slowed up a little bit earlier. You've noticed that as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
It's for a number of years now. It used to be. I remember growing up. It used to be the autumn time was the banquet. That was the time when you fill your boots. But I seem to feel that time now is more into sort of September. August,
more late summertime.
Late summer, and you can try to hazard a guess to why, but I can't. I know that we've got a changing climate as well at the moment, so the winter's gone past. We used to have those proper lockdowns, didn't you, of like freezing cold weather, and the fish knew it's coming. But now, the winter we just had was mild,
no
wet.
cold weather at all.
Cold. I can remember a couple of frosts. That was about it.
It was colder in May than it was through the whole winter, wasn't it? We had more frost in May than we had in the whole winter. So
the carp are adapting to that, and
the amount of bait that goes into lakes as well.
There's a lot of bait that gets put into lakes now,
and much better quality bait.
Much better quality.
People aren't putting, go back 20 years. People put 10 baits around each hook bait. Now they're putting kilos
Used
out.
to think a 12-ounce mix was a lot of bait. Didn't you?
When people were using rollers like that, or hand rolling it, every boilie was worth hours.
Hours. Didn't want to put it in.
Yeah. No, I was fishing the other week actually, and they just finished spawning, and I was using the humble sweet corn, thinking I've got to get a bite soon because they weren't that far off of me. And Jordan was catching a few slightly different conditions. He was fishing under wood as well, and I think they were probably preferring that. But he did say to me as well, I reckon if you were using boilies, you might have. They've just finished spawning, and maybe
they wanted some food.
Very calorific.
They wanted some real food.
Yeah,
they
calorific.
Vegetarian.
Absolutely. Yeah, that time of year when they're coming out of spawning, then.
Straight after spawning.
Yeah, they are looking for food, and a calorific boilie ticks the box perfectly, absolutely perfect. So you find that you get a lot of big captures around the water park. You notice straight after spawning that sort of 6-week period, everything's trying to recover, and the fish are getting caught left, right, and centre.
But like you say, we could be putting so much bait out at that time of the year that we're subsidising what they need later on into the year.
If they're building up and they're replenishing all those reserves, by the time we get into October, they're already there. So they're just maintaining, ticking over, and that makes total sense to me.
I saw you sort of screw your face up a little bit, Simon.
No, I agree with that.
Do you?
I think he's right. It's a lot, the quality and the volume of bait's gone up, hasn't it? So the fish have reached that point that they're recharged and ready for next year's spawning earlier in the year. It's not happening in September anymore. That could, definitely. Mark, do you think at Blue Water that the fish bubbled up? I get quite a few questions about fish bubbling. What makes fish bubble?
Fish bubble?
Yeah, like on when they're fizzing up. Are you seeing fizzing at Blue Water?
Yeah, seeing fizzing, definitely. Yeah, when you get those conditions where it's like a mill pond, and that, often you see the fish fizz, and then you get a show.
Yeah,
and
how down. Much? I mean, a question that I got asked was recently on Instagram was I was surprised, but this is a video I'd put up, and people were saying, "Oh, I'm surprised how little bubbles a big fish made." But actually, it's actually nothing to do with the size of the fish, but a great deal more to do with the sediment that fish is actually feeding in.
Yeah.
And what sort of bubbles do you see at Blue Water then?
They're quite small. They're not like typically on sort of some of the other gravel pits. They're quite frothy and can quite big and they sort of hang in the morning mist. But these ones are quite small, I'd say, in comparison. Why would you think they'd be so small? I suppose.
I just think that's the type of gas that's trapped in the sediment.
Trapped in because it's like it's very fine down there. So I'm guessing.
Yeah, any big bubbles just go straight up through, isn't it? It's going to come out.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And the video I posted was just this fish grabbling about on just some sort of sandy, gravelly ground, and there were little tiny pinhead bubbles you could see on the video coming up. Yeah, I'm surprised it doesn't make bigger bubbles, but it's all to do with the sediment of the fish. I think the thing that comes out of it is that if you can, just watch it, even for single bubbles.
Yes,
there's some, not always, but that can be a clue. So bubblers.
Yeah, when you drag a lead back through the Blue Water and that, you don't get on other lakes when there's like choddy bottoms or something. You get a big bubble as the lead's coming back. But on there, you drag a lead back and you get tiny little pinpricks, I suppose, all the way back in. So you would mistake them for something else feeding, like roach or tench or something like that, but they're actually carp, but they're hard to spot.
I was going to say that sounds on these old gravel pits as well. There's so much gases in the bottom. I mean, you can walk around there and you can see bubbling all day long, and it's like, whoa, there's one. But it's like, but
I think
you tend to see more fizzing. You see sheeting more.
You're looking. It's learning to look for the right sort of bubbling that is fish, and then being wired in to look for that all the time, isn't it? That's the clue.
It needs to be nice and calm as well.
It helps. Early morning though, you get that lovely little spell, don't you, in early morning where the wind hasn't picked up and you get that flat calm, and that's the time to sort of be looking and getting the right light as well, isn't it? It's looking into that darker water, I suppose. When you get that silver sheen on the water, it's very hard to spot anything there.
Yeah, I'd say about the ripple, but I once discovered that on a particular lake where there was a bit of pellet going in, that actually if you watch the ripple, you were getting little flat spots, and that was the fish passing oil. So it's coming through the gut, coming out of the gut, and then coming to the surface and creating a little flat spot on the surface, like when you put pellet in and it
how big?
They were only like the size of a plate, like that. But I was watching in the evenings and I was seeing these little flat spots appearing in the ripple, and I thought there must be roach or something. Anyway, eventually I spotted a carp. It just rolled on the surface, and I reeled in a rod and flicked it to it and caught one straight away. And after that, I suddenly clocked that if you put in some oily pennet and then you look for these little flat spots, wherever the carp were and wherever it was passing through their gut, and they were just the vent was producing little bims of oil coming to the surface, that was like the giveaway. It was like a flag saying the fish are here.
Wow.
And the fish are sitting there on the
bottom.
bottom.
That came up.
Hey,
wow,
that's a
little gem, that is.
The fish are actually sitting there trying their best not to do a little oily fart, because if they do, it comes to the
Scott
surface.
is on them.
And you can see them.
Yeah, I bet,
but honestly, I caught a lot of fish that year. Just literally arriving. I'd always fish my bait spots, but I'd be looking round in the swim for tiny little flat spots coming up.
Carp farts.
Yeah, wherever because of course as the fish is passing waste,
makes sense.
There's a bit too much oil. They can't digest it, so it actually comes out of the vent, and being a bit of oil, as Mark said, it rises to the surface. You get your little flat spot.
Wow.
So in a gentle ripple, it's like they're there.
There you go.
That's it.
That's a gem.
They couldn't even fart into
I
it.
know. They're not safe.
Worth looking out for. Little flat spots. Particularly if you're feeding oily pellets. It's
of course,
100%.
Yeah, good reason to be using, oily baits anyway, isn't it, for that purpose. So as a synopsis of the session then, I mean, Simon?
I'm never going back to the Cotswolds. It's one of my least favourite places in the world now. No, I love it. I tell you, I think for me, it's a sign of a good session. It's one where you actually desperately want to go back. And having had the session at Blue Water, obviously Mark caught a fantastic carp, and it was great to see, great to spend some time with Mark and the rest of the crew. But it made me want to go back, because I felt on the last night I was getting closer, and I think I felt if I could have just done another night or two, you suddenly, the bits of the jigsaw are going together, and you're trying to learn. When you arrive on a lake for the very first time, you're under the pressure of the camera crew. You're trying to put the pieces of that jigsaw together as quickly as possible, and I didn't quite get there in time. I did feel on the last night, suddenly it was like I should be in that swim over there, and I should have just
so you would have moved swims?
Yeah, I would have moved again. I would have moved, I think, in the last night, in the middle of the night. would have been the perfect scenario.
Right.
I couldn't have asked Lewis to do it. It was pouring with
It
rain.
was tipping that
It was
night,
tipping
yeah.
down. And I looked at Lewis, and he's there all covered in.
Would you have normally done that then?
I think I would have moved on that.
Would you?
They were showing to my left in the edge. I think I should have come round there, but it's difficult one, isn't it? I cast towards him, but naturally for me it would have been better to place him. But yeah, it does. You often want to. I wanted to go back, so it was. For me, it was. That's what you want to go fishing.
Of course,
isn't
that's good.
Yeah.
Mark, happy with the session, obviously.
Yeah, as I said before, there's a huge amount of pressure on these sessions, especially when being filmed. So, if you could have sort of said at the start, there's going to be three fish caught, and one of them's going to be one of the gems, then you take it, regardless of who catches them. So, yeah, it was. It worked out okay, but that could have easily gone the other way, easily, and. Just you always feel very fortunate when it goes right, and it doesn't. And often you could be on the end of a blank, But luckily for that session, the Carp gods were smiling, and we managed to nick one.
Yeah, no, it's good. Hopefully people can watch this. I mean, it's had some good views so far.
Yeah,
so,
as a show. I mean, the filming, as I've said, is fantastic, and
it's
Mark caught a great fish. There's plenty on there for people to learn, I think.
Yeah.
And the team, I echo what Simon said. The team of guys there working on these shoots, they're just relentless. They're up all night. The hours that they put into it to get all these shots, they're a credit to the industry. They're fantastic guys.
Yeah, well done, guys. Have you got any plans to do any more together?
I don't. Well, trying to find the time is
We've not been
going to be
asked.
challenging.
We've not been asked.
So we don't know. I'm sure we'll go out and do some fishing together at some point. Hopefully, I'll be collaring Simon to come over and to assess some of the water that I hopefully have by tomorrow.
Good luck with that.
Yeah,
There'll be a consultancy charge.
yeah, I'm sure there will be. I'm sure there will. But I'm sure we get out on the bank sometime together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know Tom Roster's been in touch. He wants to hook up and do
Does he?
some bits and pieces. So yeah,
It's been a funny old year though, hasn't it, with everything that's gone on. So it seems like it's rushing past at the moment. We're already into the.
I can't believe it's July, isn't it?
I know. Another.
It's gone, hasn't it?
Yeah.
another
It
6,
feels
7
like-
weeks.
I know. Suddenly the carp harvest is suddenly like close. I think, oh no.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's coming. Crikey. Yeah, so before you know it, 6-7 weeks would be getting cooler, and oh dear me, just
Well, the film was nearly a year ago. It'd be so. Yeah.
absolutely.
All right, guys. Really interesting as usual. So you can watch your thinking tackle on the Korda YouTube channel now.
Yep.
So great to have you both on.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The Thinking Tackle Podcast.